Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our afternoon webinar with ServisBOT and AA Insurance. Delighted to welcome you all. As we do with all of these webinars, we're going to give a couple of minutes for people to log in. I can see people actively logging in. So hi to Niall and Michal and Paul and Simon and Stephen. Great to see you all there. On screen, you see Cormac Farrelly of WSI, who as always are supporting us on this webinar. Cathal McGloin of ServisBOT, who's one of our main presenters today, and obviously delighted to welcome Dee Roberts of AA Insurance, who is going to share a really insightful case study with us today on this webinar. As with all the webinars, we're really keen to have it as engaging as possible. So first and foremost, if you could just give me a heads up to let me know you can hear and see us okay. And as we go along, I know both Cathal and Dee are happy to take questions. So just put them in the chat bot or the questions window there to the side, and I keep an eye out for them. Hi Sean, I see you logging in there. So please do make this as interactive as possible, because I think this topic is a really interesting topic for members, given the current situation and the new ways of working and how companies are looking for new channels for contacts and redirecting calls in many cases. So please do make it as interactive as possible and put your questions up there. As always, a copy of the presentation will be available in the members area straight after this event, and it's open to everybody, so not just members. And the recording of today's webinar, it normally takes us a few hours, so we'd hope that that'll be up certainly tomorrow morning, and we'll let you know that it's there so you can access that. And I'm sure Cathal and Dee will be happy if anybody wants to drop them an email with any more detailed questions. Just let me know and send me the email and I can forward it on to them. So just waiting for a couple of more people, and this is great to see everybody on time. So thanks. Hi Shane, I see you joining there. I'm just looking, it's 14:02. I'm going to bow out and I will hand over to Cathal. Thanks, Cathal.
Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's morning time over here in the US. So at least you're going to get the perspective of COVID from two sides of the Atlantic. Dee's going to tell you what it's like to be in Ireland. I'm going to tell you what it's like sort of to be here. So Cormac, if you just move to the next slide, just to introduce our presenter today. We're delighted to have Dee Roberts. Dee is Director of Contact Center Transformation at the AA. Dee also has a long background in contact centers, having previously worked with Hertz. So I'm sure she'll introduce herself and tell a little bit about it. So she's eminently qualified to talk about the topic that we're going to discuss today. Myself, I'm the CEO and founder of ServisBOT. I'm actually based in the States, although as you can tell, this is not a Boston accent. And I may have met some of you before when we presented a couple of months back with Dorothy, and thanks Dorothy again for hosting us. So today's agenda, I mean, these are sort of strange times that we live in. I'm going to give, for those of you who are new, just a very brief introduction to ServisBOT. But really what we're here to talk about is to listen to Dee and her story about how one company reacted to this COVID-19. And there is no doubt that it's had a huge impact on contact centers. So we're going to look at a little bit about that. I'll give you some perspectives of what's happening here in the US and some perspectives of what's happening with some of our other customers. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of call deflection in general and how we look at it and how we approach it. And then I'm going to hand over to Dee, who's going to actually take us through the case study and some of the results. And then we're going to show you a little video, I think, along the way. We're going to do a poll or two just to get your perspective on things and see how it's impacting you. And again, I think in the spirit of the CCMA, this is about sharing information so that people help each other. I think that's the general. It's unfortunately, one of the good things that's come out of this whole thing is that people actually are beginning to get back to basics and help people more. And we've certainly seen it here in the US and where I live. People are more willing to say hello, to talk to help, and just see how things are. So it's one of the nice things, and I think that's what we want here today, is if we can help anybody, we're more than happy to do that. So Cormac, just move to the next slide, please. And I'll give a quick introduction to ServisBOT. Ultimately, we think about ServisBOT as being automation. This is really about automating key customer interactions. We do it across all of a number of different channels. So we're channel agnostic in terms of how we automate. But actually, more importantly, we're we look upon this as helping automate different parts of the customer journey. So we help customers not just on the inbound support area, but actually we help customers in the customer acquisition side, on the operations side, renewals, loyalty, and so on and so forth. And what we're trying to drive here is specific business outcomes, business results. So we're doing automation to help improve the customer service, improve the customer engagement itself, but also to actually drive a business result. We've been working with the AA for about 18 months now. The AA were one of our first customers, and they have deployed a number of automation solutions. And what's interesting, their first one was actually on the customer acquisition side. They actually built a solution. They built it, we didn't. They built a solution to actually automate conversions from a website. So really interesting in terms of they are doing acquisition, they're doing customer support. And as I say, they're also our first one that we've helped with called Deflection. So it'll be interesting to hear Dee's story about that. So that's what we do. We help automate key customer interactions. And I think in general, Cormac, if you move to the next slide, please. I think in general, you will see, I saw a report in the finance industry, is that one of the big things that's going to be post-COVID, and people are talking about post-COVID, this post-COVID world, people are going to be talking about automation a lot more in this post-COVID world. Whoever thought that, when you think about disaster recovery and business continuity, nobody, certainly none of the people I've ever talked to in the States, ever thought that we'd have this concept of you would not have people being able to work together in a shared center, right? So nobody had a disaster recovery or business continuity plan that envisaged 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people working from home, right? So it's a brand new world, and it has created all sorts of problems, I think, that nobody's even thought they'd have, right? We have one customer that we work with. He's a large outsourcer. And if people think they had in Ireland, normal companies think they have problems getting people working from home. This outsourcer had 30,000 people in, I think, Philippines. And their problem was they couldn't have people work from home because those people had no internet access and no computers and so on. So they actually had to build in the space of a week housing for something like 10 or 15,000 people to actually keep those people on site to be able to do it. So it is completely disrupted a number of industries. I think we're going to see a major changes in how we do business coming out of this. We'd already been seeing a trend towards companies doing more insourcing, bringing things back in-house than previously. But certainly when you rely on a partner that, like a large outsourcer that suddenly, has people in, different countries that don't have the infrastructure to support from home, you're going to rethink your business continuity, your disaster recovery. So I think it's really going to change a lot of things. As I say, I think we're going to see a lot more automation, and we're going to see a lot more cloud. We're going to see more decentralized systems, and it's going to have a real impact for us. Everywhere I go, every service provider I ring, the first thing they do is to say, I'm sorry, due to COVID, we're restricting our service hours, we're restricting the number of people in our contact centers. We're going to have to sort of get back to you. And you can see that this is having a big impact on customer service and customer experience. Now, people are being patient about it, but if this happens again and again and again, and who knows how often this is going to happen over the next sort of 10 or 15 years, people aren't going to be so patient the next time. I think we're going to have to solve some of these problems, and that's what we're here to do today. So Cormac, if you move to the next slide.
Do you want to launch the poll call at this point?
Oh, poll, yes, Cormac, good idea. So just launch a poll. We've done up a poll just to see how COVID is impacting. So we'd love to get your input on this. So please select, has it had an impact? How much of an impact does it has? And we'll share the results with you after, okay? So go ahead and select it.
That's great. Everyone's voting away there now.
Right. So again, this is just sort of informal, just to see how it's impacting. Everybody can see the results, but I think it's
Okay, let me close this now for you, Cathal. So
thanks,
there
Carl.
the results are. I'm just going to share them on the screen.
All right. So we're seeing, wow. So about 38% are the same or lower. So the majority is definitely up somewhat, and 46% is 50% or greater, right? So 46% of you are seeing 50% or greater impact on your contact center from COVID, right? So that's interesting. So a couple of industries are obviously, a couple of sectors lower. So obviously, I'm sure well, I was going to say I'm sure the cruise lines are having a lower, but actually probably people coming up to cancel on them. But I'm sure there's some industries that are just, people aren't doing it, aren't going there. But obviously it is impacting everybody. Okay, thanks, Cormac. So let's move ahead now to the next slide. So we're talking about, we have a 3-step approach to sort of deflection automation. We talk about deflect, automate, and integrate. And I'm just going to tee this up then for Dee to tell you the story. Deflection is obviously, we're trying to deflect calls away from a human to try and move it into an automation realm. But I think what is interesting about the case study here is we made sure that it wasn't just deflect and automate. The third part is integrate, is that you have to find a way of, if you can't solve the problem, if the AI can't solve the particular problem, you've got to find a way to allow it to go back to a person, to a human, or to at least integrate it with data so you can transact and you can do certain things. So we talk about deflection, which is moving it from one channel to another. We talk about automation, which is applying the AI. And again, we're using AI here, natural language, to understand the intent, whether it's a voice spoken or whether it's via chat. And then sort of the integrate phase is really about integrating with existing systems. If you look at the next slide, I just wanted to show one concept of active call deflection. For us is only one part of how you could introduce automation into an organization. So we talk about, at a very minimum, you could introduce automation by doing something like simple, like out of hours response, where instead of closing your contact center or your live chat, you provide an automation solution that deals with out of hours, if nothing other than to answer simple queries, automate simple things, but perhaps even capture information to say to the customer, I hear you, I can take your details. We don't have anybody now, but we will tee this up for somebody to call you back in the morning. So we see active call deflection as being a range of things that can be used to help introduce automation into the organization. It generally starts out of our response. We're going to talk today about the active call deflection, which is you want to move it from an overburdened channel or from sometimes your peak call times into another channel. And then we talk about query triaging, which is, you know, trying to understand what the problem is and then either route it to the correct person via a queue, via live chat, via email, or actually tee up and take details from a customer in preparation for maybe an offline handover. So tee up an email, tee up a work task, but grab their details, get their details so that when somebody comes in the next morning, they can actually do that. So we have a range of sort of ways in which you can introduce automation. Call deflection is a good one. And we're going to look at, I think, call deflection and warm handoff today. So move to the next slide. Here, the kind of benefits that we're seeing from this. So from this introducing automation. So at a minimum, we're seeing improvement in up to sort of 15% sort of lower service cost by just implementing what we call a reception, which is out of hours, being able to handle inbound queries and deflect 24/7, but not really doing a lot of integration here. So simply by being able to move it over, maybe deal with some FAQs, low touch integration here, we're actually seeing some big improvements just from that alone. When you add on chat triage to that sort of automation, you then get more improvement in productivity. You get better, you get to lower your service cost because we're actually capturing some of that information ahead of time without the need for a human to do it. So we're asking for their account number, we're asking for their problem, we're asking for some diagnosis, or if it has to do with a renewal, we're capturing some details, maybe some changes. You can actually improve productivity quite significantly just by automating and then triaging, again, even without doing a lot of automation. And then the real power comes from when you start to automate things like renewals and onboarding and collections and other areas where you need integration with those back-end systems. That's really where you see the power of automation. but it can be a step journey. It can be as simple as automate your out of hours, automate your call deflection, start to triage, and then the journey is towards automation. And this is just a way we think about introducing automation into the organization. So with that, I'm going to stop. Let's show you a little video of call deflection in action, and then I'm going to hand over to Dee and let Dee tell you the AA story about how this came about. So Cormac, can you trigger the video?
Sure, just give me one moment here.
While you're doing that, Cormac, Cathal, we have a question in which, just go with that, Cormac. So Jeff has asked, are you helping customers calculate the return on investment of your solution with cost savings from call deflections?
Yes, and I think Dee is going to share some details from the case study today, so I'm not going to steal Dee's thunder on that one. But yes, we do.
Okay, great.
So this is just a video of it actually in working, a little demo of it working. And
hello, welcome to customer service. We are experiencing high call volumes at present. Our wait time is more than 10 minutes. Press 1 to receive a link to our virtual assistant where you can get immediate assistance.
assistant. Now with that pressing 1, what we actually did was, when I pressed 1, we transfer the call from their IVR ACD over to a cloud ACD, and we use AWS Connect for that step. So we transfer the call over to AWS Connect. Within AWS Connect, which is, as you know, a cloud contact center, Amazon Connect, we can understand whether they're calling from a mobile number. If they're calling from a mobile number, we're going to send them an SMS link to their device. If they're not calling from a mobile number, we can ask them for their mobile number. We send them a link via SMS to a virtual assistant. That's just a mobile web interface. It opened up immediately on their device. And now we have them in a chat channel where we can actually start to present them information, maybe the top queries, frequently asked questions. And we then tried, and that little video showed, and again, we'll share this video with you. It showed then that we tried to actually automate some things. So some things could actually be automated there. But if they weren't, we allowed them to escalate and to hand over to a human. So we had deflection, we had automation in that little video, and we had integration in that video, those 3 steps from it, right? And again, very simple thing to do, very easy to set up. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Dee, and Dee can talk about a practical example of it. Dee, over to you.
Great, thank you, Cathal. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, so just in terms of a quick introduction, so my name's Dee. I am Director of Contact Center Transformations for the AA. I'm relatively new to the company, but have worked in call centers since probably 2004, a little bit in college before that. And have now made it somewhat of a career for myself, which is probably not the plan I originally had. So to cover off our bot journey, about 18 months ago, the AA and ServisBOT engaged to solve a problem which was really around how to improve our conversion with increasing PPC costs. We were seeing not the same return on conversion rate that we had hoped. So the product that we went with then was, how can a chatbot help us in this online journey, knowing that if a customer calls us into a contact center, we have a much greater rate of converting them. So we spent a lot of time with agents, we spent a lot of time with our digital team to understand the online journey and where customers were falling out of it, where they were falling down, and how we can use the knowledge and the skills of a phone agent to build a chatbot that will support a customer through that. So that's when Quote Helper was born. So that was down the back end of 2018. Quote Helper presents on the price presentation page of your insurance quote and allows you to go through a series of scenarios, helping you in discounting it, helping you in understanding why the price is there and what could lower your price. you know, for example, if you have a second car in the household, etc. So that has been very, very successful, and we saw some great results from that. Then the CX bot was launched shortly afterwards, and that was to try and alleviate some of the pressure in a department that was kind of straining from a resource perspective. We then launched 2 smaller bots, which were for travel and membership, which are 2 of our kind of smaller products. These bots work like very much like an FAQ bot. They're quite simple, and we're working on refining and developing those now. And then we ended up with the pretty much immediate need, as a result of selling travel insurance, to have a voice bot or something to help with the volume on the lines that we had there. So I suppose the most important thing for us was that all of our experience with bots has been between ServisBOT and the business side of the company, rather than having IT lead and drive a bot project. So the platform is very easy to use. We've recently had a new starter, and within her first month, she's received training and has been able to start building and tweaking our bot flows. So it's very intuitive. It doesn't require you to be a developer to use it, and I think that's the most attractive thing about working with ServisBOT, and also the small, the kind of the personal relationship that we have, because we've worked with them quite early on in their journey. It's been great to have that personal kind of touch with them, and obviously an Irish company makes it a little bit easier to do business. So it's good. So if we want to move on to the next slide. So our problem statement really started with this kind of the European spike of the coronavirus. As we saw more travel restrictions coming in, we saw changes, we saw Disneyland closing globally, and day to day and intraday, these changes were coming so quickly and so fast paced that we were really barely able to keep up on top of it. So we saw a huge spike in people purchasing travel insurance for, say, trips that were coming up that maybe hadn't been covered, but then immediately contacting us to understand would they be covered if something happened. And our communications out to our customers through our CRM platform just couldn't keep up with the growth of and the new information that we were required to give, and that customers were looking for. And we didn't want to also explode in people's inboxes. So all of our correct information was online. We just really needed to focus on how we could tell customers on the phone channel that they needed to go there. So I suppose that's where we went to ServisBOT with that problem of this forecast versus reality situation, which everyone in a call center understands is a critical pain point. And how could we kind of nip that in the bud and move these customers effectively without being detrimental to their customer experience to a digital channel, while feeling like they were within the same channel. So literally within 48 hours, we'd spun up this bot. Again, it was between myself, ServisBOT, very little input from IT, just having them facilitate the transfer to the AWS phone number from our own line based on an option selection. I think IT themselves were so surprised at how straightforward it was, because being on a server-based ACD, you normally think you can't do things like phone to message deflection, but here we were proving that it could be done, and could be done quite quickly. So we managed to launch it on the 9th of March, and on the second level of our IVR menus. So, you know, we were giving people their specific product offerings, and then when they went into those offerings, advising them that they can press 6 to have their question answered by text. So if we move on to the next slide.
Gee, sorry, just one question in there from Susan. Yeah. Is there a particular type of person or skill set that suits staff to build bots?
So I would say yes, it's someone who's quite process orientated, so who can think through something in a very logical series of actions, as well as someone who's able to work with a large pool of people to know, you know, what should our bot say, how should it behave, what should it do, and do we want it to appear like a person or appear like a bot? You know, how do we add that personal touch, which was important to us, while also letting people know that this is an automated solution, and we can pass you off to a real person if needed. So I would say someone who's logical and process focused. I mean, I think that anyone with experience in contact centers is experienced in process thinking, whether or not they feel like they are. I'm not saying you need to be a black belt in Lean Six Sigma to build a bot. Quite the opposite, actually. I would say you need to be able to think through a process quite logically, map it out, and then determine what you want the bot to do for you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks. So the solution that we've kind of touched on there was to build a solution that would shift our voice calls to messaging using all of our existing technology as much as possible. I did bypass a few of our IT processes that I had to then retrospectively go through to make sure that we ticked all the boxes. But essentially, we wanted to make sure that we could use our existing tech as much as we could, reduce any costs. So we had some costs, obviously, by sending out the customer an SMS. That was in line with what our current CRM text messaging costs. So that was okay. I didn't have to get too much support on that. And again, the aim was to reduce the calls by 100 a day for the travel lines, which were currently at around 400% of forecast. There wasn't too much of a focus on our other CX calls at this time, because we knew we had the resources to cope with them if we could take the travel volume away. So once the customer went through the process and received the text, they clicked on a link that was sent to them. That link opens up the chat, as you saw in the video, within a browser on your mobile, and it's very much, it feels like a WhatsApp style conversation. They routed straight into our CX bot, where we had added in additional content and additional FAQs and links to help customers self-serve there, and then gave an option to hand over to an agent if they needed it. So that CX bot is live on the AA website. Like I said, it was the second bot that we launched. It's quite a simple bot in that it's a question answer bot, but it's so effective at deflecting calls, and it proved so effective in managing this volume that we were seeing. As well as that, ServisBOT helped us with putting some appropriate bannering and messaging on the bot for, you know, if you're looking for COVID information, like click here, so that they could just go straight into what they needed, and adding it to the upfront menu options, whereas before, obviously, it wouldn't really have been there. We were more focused on having people renew their car insurance policy through this bot than asking whether or not a virus that originated in China was going to affect their holiday in Spain in 6 months' time. So we did some new bot training, and we had a new starter around this time as well. So Valerie did a lot of process mapping for the CX bot to make sure that we never left a customer kind of in a bot loop, because we know that can be so detrimental to a customer's experience, and that those handovers to agents were available. We onboarded additional agents into our chat team quite quickly, which actually proved to be a little bit forward thinking, given the next changes that came within the Irish business environment. And those agents were able to facilitate the few handovers that were coming, but essentially the bot served the purpose of self-service and reassurance for customers that, you know, we would be able to give them the most up-to-date information that they needed through that. The other great thing is that that link on their SMS stays active. So if they feel that they need to go and get that information again, they can go back in through that link to the CX bot. So it's always there in their phone, which is brilliant. So that was great. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. Okay, so I've covered off pretty much how it works. So here we have the customer helper. So we added a red banner on the top of that, as I said, to talk about Corona, which we've taken off now as our volume is kind of stabilized. If they went through for information about coronavirus, we sent them the link to our most up-to-date FAQs, and then we did a handover to our web chat agents if it was required. Again, from the travel side of things, the handovers were very rarely required, because they did get the information that they needed, which was straight from our underwriter on our FAQ page. So we're seeing a great deflection rate there of 11%. That's about 200 calls a day. And actually what we've seen now, as travel has kind of stabilized in terms of volume, that customers from other parts of the business, because we moved this from just the travel line to our first main menu, our existing customer base are able to use this for a lot more than just coronavirus. So that self-service message is really being promoted to them very early on in the IVR journey, and they understand that they can get help with their renewal. You know, all the options that you see there around document requirements, check levels of cover, or anything else, which includes purchasing a new policy. They can do all of that through our CX bot, but maybe they would never have known about it beforehand. That's great. Move on to the next one. So here are the results. So the travel call volume. So you can see here from the end of February, we were a bit up and down in terms of forecast. The very concrete dips that you can see there are generally Saturdays when we operate on a half day, and our volume would be a good bit lower anyway. So we have seen that we see no negative feedback from customers. They are quick to come back to us if they do experience issues with the bot. Our NPS has improved within the area, so that would be the phone NPS of those customers who are hanging to speak to someone for a non-travel related query. We've seen that move by 10 points. And then we've had 4,000 customers interact with our CX bot over March, which is compared to February. Sorry, we've up 4,000 compared to February, which is since we've widened the scope to cover travel and to promote more use of that. And then, like I said, we're seeing between 160 and 220 calls deflected a day. So all in all, it's been very, very successful. The business love it. The financial controller really loves it. And from a customer side, it's giving us the ability to focus on the customers that we know we can help with more complex transactional queries than those that were ringing with the information that the bot could have given them. So thank you. And I think we'll move on to the next slide. Yep, so I think this is just
summary, I think, yeah.
Yeah, summarizing it off. So Cathal, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Dee has given a great example. The deflection part is very simple, as Dee mentioned. It's very simple and straightforward to do. I think the reason the AA bot was so successful is because they thought through how they wanted to do. They tied it into something that they had sort of already there, and they thought about it beyond just the one issue of how do we deflect it. They had a plan for expanding it to cover other areas, and I think that was the key. So as I say, the tech stuff is easy enough to do. We can do that very, very simply. But it's really about, okay, what do you do when you deflect a call then? How do you handle it? The AA, had already integrated with human handover, so they had already said from the very start, when we want our bots, if the bot can't handle it, we want people to be able to escalate and speak to a human. And I think that, personally, I think that's a very important part of automation, is that it's not automation only, it's automation first, right? And by doing it like that, you can see they took care of the concerns in the early days. They allowed people to escalate if they wanted, but interestingly, that they didn't want when they were calling about coronavirus, because they got the information they needed, but they had the choice to do that. And I think they've done a really good job of integrating it with others. We're actually doing another project here in the US at the moment around mortgage protection, because I think similar to Europe, if anybody who just mentions COVID-19 to their mortgage provider, they get automatically a 6-month, or they can apply for a 6-month forbearance on their mortgage. And so we're helping this company do the same thing, which is deflect concerned people and then move them into applying for this sort of mortgage forbearance. But it's all about what's your plan once you do deflect. You have to have a plan to deflect, whether that's deflect to an existing website, to an existing form, and then how do you deal with somebody who gets nervous and really wants to talk to a human. I think that escalation to a human, we believe, is an important part of it. So again, we're happy to answer questions. I know we've got about 10 minutes. I prefer to open it up to any questions from the audience now. I think, did we have a second poll? I'm sorry, did we have a second poll?
We have a second poll. We can launch that now, Cathal, if you'd like.
Let's launch that, Cormac, and just see who's already working in with automation and with chatbots. And then if anybody's any questions, please feel free to put them in the channel, and we're happy to answer anything we can. As I say, our goal is just to give you whatever information that if it can help you.
I'll kick off with one question, probably for Dee. Dee, what has been the staff reaction? I know you guys had already gone down the chatbot route prior to obviously the recent development. But what has been the staff feedback and reaction to the introduction of the bot?
So that's a really good question, and I suppose there's a couple of different pools of staff to think about. So from the phone agents who were being bombarded, they are delighted because for them these were very low value calls. We weren't able to offer much more to a customer than was written on the website, and the website was as up to date as our agents always were. So they were just happy to see the pressure ease and to come back in line with forecast when we were able to. From the management perspective, then again, I think they were surprised and delighted with how quickly we could spin something up that seemed very complicated, but actually used so much of what we already had today. So that is really reassuring for the future. As I mentioned, you know, I'm quite recent to the AA, so to be able to launch something so successful quite quickly as well was great from my own personal perspective. From a chat agent perspective, they didn't really notice the difference because these chats didn't end up really routing to the ones specifically on travel, didn't really route to an agent. They more or less got answered and handled within the bubble of the chatbot. So they didn't notice the pain points that you know the phone agents were really dealing with. So yeah, so good all around, positive.
Great, and I don't know you want to look at the results of the poll there, Cathal, but one other question has come in, which is what is the success rate of the bot? Michal has asked that.
So I suppose it determines on what we're going to measure for success rate. For me, the success rate was taking these low value calls out of the contact center and seeing that travel volume come back in line with forecast and start dipping below forecast now is really how I would measure success. You know, people are bizarrely still continuing to purchase travel insurance, and they are also you know, questioning today their travel insurance for you know, holidays that they may have planned towards the end of the year. So we do still receive volume there. Again, the bot and our chat agents are there to handle those that don't want to wait on the phone. So I would consider those two the main measures of success, taking that workload out and not having to try and resource for it at a time when it's obviously would have been extremely difficult to onboard any kind of agent capacity. Really has just has been great.
Well, let me give you some other metrics on that one in terms of success rates that we're seeing across sort of industries. When you send a link, an SMS link, as most people know, it's a very high open rate on sort of SMSs in general, right? But so let's say it's a 97, 98% open rate, which is the industry standard for SMS anyway. We're seeing probably an 80% plus engagement across all our customers when they open up a link that they'll actually engage with the bot. So we're seeing sort of 80% plus engagement rate, which is quite high, way higher than if you got an unsolicited email. So we're seeing a very high engagement rate with the bot. And I know from previous work that the AA had published in a case study, and it's on the site, is that they're seeing a high engagement rate. Once they engage with the bot, they see a low sort of escalation, if they engage with a bot on this quote site, they're seeing a very high sort of correlation between that and sort of engagement within their business. So success is quite high in terms of getting people to engage. Beyond that, it's up, I think, to the the company themselves, right? You've got to figure out what you do when you get that person in there and how you deal with them. And it's a testament to Dee and her team that they managed to increase their NPS scores by 10 points, because getting the person in there is one thing, but how you deal with them, that's going to determine whether your NPS is going to go up or not. So, I mean, I see that about 38% of you are already working with bots, so that's great. 54% are not. So again, something to think about. Any other questions? Or as I said, we've got a few minutes left. More than happy, Dorothy, to answer any more questions. Either related.
I think the only other question that I would have myself would be the whole how important the human handover is and how complex that is to integrate it to the call deflection solution. So that whole aspect of how you fit the technology with the human interaction.
Yeah. So what we've seen is, and again, I'd be interested in these thoughts. So we've seen two things. When you put a bot on a website that you already have information there, and you can actually use that website to direct from the bot to place on the website where there is information. So we've seen things like if they have forms or already got that information maybe hidden on the website, but it's not easy to get at, asking the bot a question, you can use the website to actually divert them to where that information is. When you're on a voice, it's different. You're on a voice call, you don't have the website there to work with. So I think it becomes more important when you're on your mobile device and on voice. Whereas on the website, you can direct them to, where you may have that information already. It's just they don't know how to go and find it, or they're too lazy to go and find it in some cases. They just ask, they want to ring up and ask. So Dee, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I tend to agree. I mean, I think that being able to point people within a website is really powerful, and the automation and the technology of a bot to be able to do that is great. Where we have seen the most important elements of a human handover is really in our sales process. While our bot is great at closing sales, there's always that small element of the customer that just wants that little bit more and is asking something quite obscure or has a scenario that's quite unique to them, that they just want to know the answers for. So by being able to route that to our Zendesk application, which is how we handle our web chats, our customers get the attention they need quite quickly. I mean, from how we manage that, then when we receive the tickets, we can see the whole transcript from the bot. We can understand what led the customer there, but we can also see their web page journey. So understanding the pages that they visited before the handover, if they were on our site before, is also really effective. So I think the handover is important and the weighting of that importance varies depending on depending on the situation. So okay, yeah. Some customers require more delicate than others.
Just one last question. I'm really conscious of time. We've really only got a couple of minutes left. Thanks for that, Dee. Paul has asked, how do you overcome consumer security concerns around clicking links received by SMS?
Yeah, and we've seen that in a couple of our customers. We also work with another company in Ireland called Chill. And one of the things we had to do in the first time we worked with them is they wanted to make sure that the branding was from them. So you do it by using, first of all, using maybe an existing service that the company has. If they've already got SMS and it's a known number, that helps. Certainly by introducing the text as, it's not introduced as from ServisBOT, it's introduced as from the AA or whatever your client's name is, right? So I think it's general good practice with using SMS. I think we're going to see this issue get less and less as things like Apple Business Chat come in and other services where you're going to see native messaging on a device from a trusted brand. And that's one of the reasons we're seeing growth in Apple Business Chat. And then, Samsung have deployed messaging as a platform on all of their devices so that you can have that trust that it's coming from a trusted brand. But it's a very good question. It's very important that you make sure you introduce it as this is the brand calling, because that's what they're trusting.
Right.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in our case, our customers have invited that SMS to be sent to them. So it's a little bit different from an outbound, campaign where they might receive something out of the blue. In this case, they know that they're engaging with us.
Okay, really conscious of time. So Cathal, do you want to just go through mention your trial run, your call to action?
As I say, we're more than happy we're obviously very happy just to help anybody who has an issue. It's very easy to set up. We're happy to explain how to do it. And we're running sort of trials at the moment for anybody who wants to just test it out and try it. Easy to set up. You can try it out sort of for free. Give us a call. There's the email address, or go and check out the details at that link. But again, this is just about helping people in a certain situation. We're more willing to do it.
Brilliant. Well, we're exactly on time. So just want to say a big thank you to Dee in particular, and obviously to Cathal as well. Thank you so much. I think that was really useful. And I know, Dee, if people want to have a more detailed chat with you, you're available. If they want to drop me an email, I can introduce you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks to everybody for their participation. As I say, a recording and a copy of today's presentation will be available. And any further questions, come back to me. And everybody stay safe and stay well. Take care.
Thanks, Cormac. Good job. Thanks, Cormac.
Thank you.